So I'd say find an area or maybe a couple areas and just start underwriting every deal. And it's okay if they don't work right now. Even though there's some opportunities that I'm seeing surface, I think there's a lot more coming towards the end of the year and maybe even next year. So if you haven't bought in the last 2 years and you've been trying, I want to say congratulations for sticking with your numbers, because there's a lot of people that wish they did stick to their numbers. I guarantee you coming up in the next 12 to 24 months. So now's the time to get educated and really know what a good deal looks like. So that when you do come across that good deal, you're solid, you know it's a good deal.
Hey, what's up, all of my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where we interview experienced real estate investors who, in my opinion, invest in multifamily, which I believe is the best asset class in real estate. And ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, my guest today, we were chatting. I can hear her giggling out back there. We were chatting in the green room, and she is a firehouse dynamo of energy. And just getting caught up with her, we've known each other for over a decade. And the stuff that she's into, I'm really, really, really privileged to have her here on the show. And let me tell you a little about her. She brings over 20 years of real estate experience to the table, including that of being a realtor, the general contractor of her own construction company. She has tax and title work background and managing her own real estate portfolio. She's highly experienced in multifamily investment properties and is often asked to speak or coach to individuals and groups in multifamily investment. Being involved in many different real estate ventures over the year has given her a unique combination of hands-on skills and deal structuring knowledge. Additionally, she's an expert in acquisitions, due diligence, and property management transitions. Applying her exceptionally diverse real estate experience along with her network engineering background, she's helped to develop and manage multiple multifamily investment property opportunities for her investors. She's purchased over 1,100 units and raised over $120 million in capital. She's an active in the investment community as a member of the Connecticut Real Estate Investors Association, the Apartment Owners Association of Connecticut, and the Women's Real Estate Investor Association. She also has a heart for nonprofit orgs. Hopefully we can get some of that story. And she has a heart for giving back as an entrepreneur. Ladies and gentlemen, my real estate peeps, it is my pleasure to introduce to you onto the podcast, Maureen Miles, the founder of 4M Capital Real Estate Investments. Maureen, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, what's up? How are you, my friend?
I am fantastic. And I see the beach in your background is covered with snow.
Yeah, we got some serious snow. I'm in Utah right now. So yeah, there's no beach and t-shirts over here for sure.
Yeah, and the only snow we have here are in the snow cones.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
We do have a riddle that hopefully we can get to by the end of the show, but I'll let my viewers stew on this one. What do a screwdriver, a flashlight, and ice cream have in common? So, yeah, Maureen, it is my pleasure and privilege, like I said, to have you here. You look wonderful, big, bright smile, as always. You were showing me around your place there, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I'm so happy for you. So, yeah, welcome to the show. If it's okay with you, I'd love to just jump right in and start with the first questions.
Sure. And I didn't look over your questions, but I'm good at shooting from the hip, Brian. So that's the way I like to go. And I just wanted to, it's over 3,400 units we've bought and developed, probably even more than that now. I just want to say that was probably an old bio with the 1,100, but just wanted to, yeah, that's okay. We all start somewhere, right? So
I only got 30% of your actual holdings in the intro.
That's okay. No worries. No worries.
Well, it could have been 60% better.
That's okay. It's fine. It's fine.
I know your story, but I'm going to ask it for our viewers. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you used to do before you got into real estate?
So, I kind of grew up around the construction industry. There was a group that was flipping houses near my grandfather's house when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And they'd pay me to kind of clean up the job site afterwards because they were getting in trouble with the city for like leaving a mess and stuff. So I was just making $10 an hour, which was a lot back then, by cleaning up kind of the job site. And then pretty soon they're like, hey, can you help me carry this cabinet? Hey, can you hold this piece of sheetrock? Hey, can you like cut this pipe or do whatever it was. And then, but I learned how to build a house from the ground up myself by the time I was like 19 or 20 years old. I could do everything. I've done roofing, I've built chimneys. So I have that background, which was cool. I went to school for electrical as well. I went to a technical high school, so I learned how to like wire things. So that's kind of where my start was in life. And then I eventually went to school, became a network engineer, worked for one of the large telecom companies. And I was always kind of in real estate in one aspect for another or another. I'd flip houses, or I started to get a small portfolio in Connecticut. I'd find 2 and 3 family units that needed to be renovated. I'd renovate them and then run them. So I'd manage them. So I built up a portfolio of about 30 units in Connecticut while I was working full time at my network engineer job. And so I was in charge of like an Asia group. So during the day, I would do real estate, and about 3 to 4 o'clock, I'd turn into a pumpkin. I'd say I'd put my business clothes on, make sure I didn't have any paint in my hair, and go into work. So I did that for a long time. I did that for like 12 years. I worked at that job. It was a room with no windows. It was killing me slowly. Like it was just terrible. But we make money and we have to do it. And even though I had a little portfolio that I always did on the sides, during the day and on the weekends, uh, I just got to the point in my life where I knew like I couldn't take on any more properties. There wasn't enough time in the day, like to actually manage more. I kind of just hit this limit. And I was out of cash very early at my like second multifamily renovation. We thought that we put a lot of stuff on credit cards, things like that, thinking, oh, we're just going to flip it. Prices are going up forever. That was like 2007, right? So I got stuck with these 2 multifamilies that I thought would flip. Ended up actually, I still have one of them today. I got to sell that sucker now that I'm talking to you. Yeah, so I got to get that off the list. But I we ran out of cash, and so I started taking a course because somebody had been watching what I was doing, and they like, hey, I work all the time. I'd love to invest in real estate, but I don't have time for it. Is there any way we can partner up? And I'm like, well, I need the cash. I can see like deals coming up now. Like this is kind of going beyond the 07, 08, 09. I think it was maybe early 10 is when I first bought the first one with a investor. But I took some real estate courses during that time on how to like work with private money because I didn't know what I didn't know. I've never done it before. And during that private money course, I learned about syndication. So that was always kind of in the back of my head why I was going through this time of now working with an investor, buying more units and things like that in Connecticut. But again, these were small, they're all self-managed. I had a hard time because I knew there were property managers out there, but I'd always ask them for their portfolio. I'm like, well, who do you manage in my area? And then I drive by those addresses. I'm like, these look like properties that I would entertain renovating and like soliciting the buyer, like, would you want to sell it? Because apparently you can't take good care of it. So I didn't want any of these property managers, running a property for me. So um, so that's kind of where, I hit a wall. I learned about syndication, but I didn't feel like I was competent enough to have large amounts of investor money in my, being responsible for that until I left my job. Now that's was kind of my own limitation in my brain. But that's just the way I felt. Like I couldn't take $1 million of somebody's money and then say, oh, well, I'll respond to that issue with the property next Tuesday when I could get time off. So for me, it was like I realized that it was really my job standing in my way of being able to grow more beyond like the 30 units I had in Connecticut. So eventually they offered a package, and that was in 2013. They offered a package for us, and I took the package. So I got 6 months of pay and insurance. And then I took the package and left my job. I'm like, it's time to go big. Like, I'm ready. Now I had been managing all these little properties all this time. And I always felt like I was like wasting time, like, because I was too scared to go big, why I still had my job and I was managing these little properties. But I realized doing that, renovating them and managing them is what made me able to, like, I was so good at the larger stuff once I got into it. So I just want to say that for anybody out there that's feeling like, oh, I should be going big or whatever, what you're learning now on these smaller scale properties is going to serve you well when and if you do go big. So that was my kind of where I cut my teeth, I guess. So now when I'm at these or participating in these large projects or in charge of them, I know I can fix anything. Like I've been through the whole gamut. I've started from, acquisitions, building those relationships with brokers and owners. And then, I raise the money for them myself. Went ahead and I buy them myself now. I don't need anybody on the GP team with me. And then run them, and then dispose of them. So I have like from start to end, there's no piece that I can't jump in and fix. So that's probably a lot for you, Brian, but there you go. There you go.
No, I take a lot of notes as I do this. So I just want to, I did have one question way at the beginning. When you were hired as a day laborer, who was that for? Was that a relative, a friend, or who was that?
It was just a group that was they were flipping a house next to my grandfather's in Connecticut. So that's where it was just he was friends with my grandfather and they needed help cleaning up the job site. And that's where it was. And they would just do that. They'd flip a house maybe every year. So they would get it. That's kind of the way he made his money, contracting on the side and then flipping houses. But that's how I originally got my first taste of real estate and seeing like, whoa, there's money to be made here. Whoa, there's like opportunity. And I just loved it. Like I love seeing the change of the property and making the difference and seeing it shift like that fills me up.
So day laborer, got all your experience, drywall, paint, and everything in between. Became a part-time entrepreneur, building a small portfolio, took the package and dove into the water to the deep end saying, that's it, I'm going for it. And what you'd mentioned there was some fear or you felt your job was holding you back. And then once they let you go, like, what was that moment like? Was there like a light switch moment where you said, wait, okay, I'm free, I can go for this now? Or can you kind of like unpack how you were feeling when all that happened?
Yeah, so I had just had 3 back surgeries in 3 years. Like when I said my job was killing me, I think it was like the emotional toll on my body of like just not wanting to be there anymore. I was, I worked second shift. They wouldn't let me switch my hours to like get my kids off the school bus. So it was just like, so I'd go like all week I'd see them in the morning, but get them off to school, which that's like a fun part of a parent's day, right? You're like, eat your breakfast. Do you have your homework? Do you have like, so they're like, it was really like kind of torturing me. Then I'd be home myself all day, like until I got into this, till I started doing real estate. I'd be home myself and then I'd go to work and I just became so unhappy and just so miserable. And I mean, to be honest, I probably wasn't the best employee at that time either. But after my third back surgery, I ended up having a fusion and it kind of fixed me. But I was just so shot. And so when that package came out, I went home with my husband at the time and I said, hey, I think I'd like to take this package and I'd like to go big. I'd like to try to go big in real estate. And, he was like, okay. I said, in worst case, like we'll just live in one of the multifamily. So in my brain, once I go for it, like there's no turning back. Right. So he's like, all right. And then, so, I mean, I know when my back's up against the wall too, like they say, burn the boats kind of thing. Like I know that I perform when you burn the boats, like I figure this stuff out. And it was kind of exciting a little bit to me because even though I was scared about it, it was something I hadn't done before. Um, I know again, I figure stuff out if I have to. So I knew that with not having that fail safe of the job, because we get so comfortable in our jobs, right? And that's what's like, oh, I could do this, but and then like anything we kind of hit that point where fear or we get a little scared to do something, it's like, well, let me go back to my job, right? So it's like without having that net, I knew I would do it. Like it's just the way I've been in my life. Like I always perform when I need to.
So burning the boats was the moment.
It was, and it took about a year before I actually got one together. So I had been going to real estate courses. What I would do is I'd always try to, because we didn't have a lot of extra money, even though I was running all this stuff, like as many people know, you could own a lot of property, but sometimes it just eats it. Like if you're break even, it's great. So my job was decent. I made over 100,000 a year. And but like, so I'm thinking, oh, I have to replace that income, because I was the breadwinner in the family. And it was just, I mean, it was a tough time, because I had that 6 months of pay, but every month you're seeing it go, so put the pressure on. And you never want to be under pressure when you're doing this thing, right? You always have to protect your investors. So that was something, I wouldn't get into a deal that I didn't understand. And I was new at the time. So it took about a year till I found, I ended up partnering with a guy that happened to have a deal and couldn't raise all the money. So that was my first into my first deal, was that, but it's only because I've been going to all these real estate events. So back when I was trying to figure out how to get educated, and because we didn't have extra money, I would do different things. I actually used to work, I used to work with a builder and do finished carpentry for him. So like trim out all the finished stuff in your house, like because I could do it. I had these skills. So even though I would just do whatever I could to make extra side money that didn't necessarily have to come out of our household. And I would pay for like real estate courses like that, or go to an event, things like that. With that money. So I mean, I'd wholesale deals. I'd flip things. I would help people with other projects. I wasn't a licensed contractor back then, but I would bring my guys, because I was doing flips on things that maybe I'd have help with, maybe a sheetrocker or something. And I would kind of help them with with some of my real estate friends with projects and kind of run some of their stuff. So whatever I could do to make some extra cash, to go to a real estate event. So I was at all the events all the time. Like if it had something real estate related, I was there. And so that's how I built up my network originally of like investors, because none of my friends or family have money. A lot of people think, oh, I just got the money from my dad, or oh, I had people come up to me all the time and say, hey, I don't have a couple $100,000 to get started, but is there a way to get started? And I'm like, dude, my first deal I got into was over 100 units in Atlanta. I said my partner had the money. So he was kind of like the money guy. He had the earnest money, and I was like the operator, and I raised some of the money to come into the deal. So that was my piece of the GP. But I said my first deal, my first partner, he was going away on vacation. He's like, hey, can you pay the video guy? It was $750. And I'm like, how am I going to tell this guy? I literally didn't, my credit cards were maxed out by then. I'd been out of work just about a year. I'm like, how am I going to tell this guy that I can't, I just literally didn't have the $750 to pay the video guy. And so that was like, I'm actually really glad that happened, because that just it reminds me of that place I was at. And so you don't need money to get started. You just need to hustle and figure out a way, work for it, get the right partners, figure it out.
So I'm going to jump back because I take a lot of notes and I want to, I go down these rabbit holes. I hear part of a story. It's like, oh, I gotta
Sure.
ask. So your first partnership, this was after you took the package within that 6 months. You met them at some networking event, and what was that relationship? What was the type of
Yeah,
deal, and how did you guys come together?
yeah, so it's funny. So we both went to the same event, which was a partnering event. That was with Dave Lindahl, right? That's where we met, Brian, originally. And so we had a UPW event. I believe it was up in Boston. And I went. Now I didn't meet my first partner. His name is Andrew. I didn't meet Andrew at the event, even though we were both there. But what happened was, right before the event, because I was involved in all these networking things, and actually this is a good lesson for anyone trying to find their start in this, is I got proposed like to raise money for a deal. And I said, hey, we need to close by X amount. Because I had people now that knew I knew my stuff. Like even though it was based on the smaller complexes, I still knew my stuff, and I was showing up at these events, and I was helping people with their underwriting, and I was getting the right answer. I'm really good at math too. I could do a little bit of brain, what do you call it? Oh, Rain Man math. That's what one of my partners says. He's like, can you pull out that Rain Man and do that? So I'm good at math in my head. So I help people figure things out. But so I got proposed to, it was like $2.5 million or something to raise a deal for this group that was buying a Texas deal. And there was 5 GPs. That's another lesson I like to tell people. When there's too many GPs involved, I just say no thank you. But anyway, there was 5 GPs in this deal. And they sent me the deck, and I started sending out to my investors who had been waiting for me to get a property. And so I started getting commitments for it, and I had the money raised. And what I started doing is just really like going through the deck. Now I was brand new. This is my first deal I'd be involved with. And it was like, I didn't know what I didn't know at the time, but like, I wasn't even like getting a piece of the GP, which is totally illegal, by the way, but I just didn't know, right? I was so new, I didn't know. So they wanted me to raise all the money, which again is a red flag for future people's getting started. If you're raising all the money, that's a red flag. But then I started like going through the deck to really understand it. And I'm like, okay, I see you guys are buying it for this. And I see you guys have your exit numbers here. I don't understand how you're getting from here to there. Like, can you explain it to me? And so I went to like one of the partners and she's like, well, I don't know. Like, Mike did that piece. So like, okay. So I go to Mike and I'm like, Mike, can you just explain how you're getting from here to here? Like, I get the acquisition numbers and then I get the disposition numbers, but what's the plan in between? Like, this doesn't really tell me. So I want to understand the plan. And then Mike was like, oh, well, I didn't do that part. Sally did that. So I go to Sally. I'm like, Sally, do you understand? Like, can you explain to me? Because I'm brand new. And again, I don't know what I don't know. And I remember even feeling like I was a little pesky, even asking, but I'm like, before I put anybody's money in, I need to understand myself from start to finish. And again, I have the construction background. I just don't see the capex for it. I don't see the things. I didn't understand what they were doing. And I just thought I was truly just trying to understand. And again, I went to all 5 partners and nobody could tell me the path from A to B. And I'm like, it was crazy.
Let me guess, you thought it was you.
Well, of course, I'm like, what am I missing? But then when I realized that nobody had the answer for me,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry. I went to the person that brought me in the deal and I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, and I was tortured for like 3 or 4 days because when you're in these groups, you don't want to, that's the common thing you hear all the time, right, Brian? It's like, oh, they couldn't raise the money. They let the partnership down, right? But it's like, so I didn't want to be that person and I had the money raised. I'm like, I ultimately realized I'm like, I can't put a dime of the investors' money in this because I don't think that they know what they're doing. Even though I was brand new and I didn't know, I'm like, I'm not comfortable. So I told my investors, I'm like, guys, I'm sorry, this is not the deal for us. Just be patient. And one of the things that surprised me is some of the investors said, thank you, Maureen, for looking out for you. We trust you and this is great. And it actually gave a stronger bond between me and the investors because they knew I wasn't just putting them in anything, right? And then when I went to the person that brought me in the deal, what she says to me, and I'll never forget this, it's like, she says, well, Maureen, she goes, I don't know what your bank account looks like, but mine is short. And we close this deal, we all get an acquisition fee at the end of the month. And I'm like, what the actual, right? So I'm like, and I'm like, oh my God, like I knew I made the right choice. Like I didn't know if I was going to be outed from all my peers in this network in real estate that I built up over the last few years. If I was going to be the one now that didn't show up with the money, which I was, but I'm like, you guys just don't have it to. So I exited that deal. And that was really, it was a rough 4 days for me. But one of the people I shared that story with as I was trying to decide what I needed to do, she's the one that introduced me to my partner, Andrew, because she said, hey, I know Maureen just exited a deal. She raised the money for it, but didn't put her investors in. So that's when Andrew said he's a little slow on raising for that deal. He reached out to me and said, hey, we have a spot. And it was legit on the GP. They needed some operations experience too. So I was a great fit for them. And I spoke with him quite a bit, just understanding him, because one of the things that I learned throughout this process of like these almost deals that I got in the beginning is not everybody thinks about investors' money like I do. So that's like one of the lessons. Because for me, I would do everything in my power to not lose an investor dollar ever, or even put it at risk. But I didn't realize, because I think people think everybody's like us sometimes, right? But I didn't realize how cold-hearted some people are and just have zero, they don't care. Like, and that was really eye-opening for me, is to understand that some people think like that. They're like, well, it's investors' money. Let's take the extreme risk because it's not mine, which is terrible. But I mean, people have to realize whether they're a passive investor in real estate deals or when they're working with partners, like really understand how people perceive investors' money. And so Andrew felt like I did with it. You know, we would do everything to never risk an investor dollar, or you know, if something happened to the deal, we would do everything to pay them back. Like, so he felt like that, like you have to treat it like way up on the pedestal, like where it is. You know, somebody worked their whole life. I had a couple of retired investors, they worked their whole life. Like one guy was an ambulance driver, and here he put his money with me. Another guy, he put like his kids' college education money with me because he felt it was better with me than on his own, which he's probably right. He said, every time I buy a stock, I lose it, Maureen. So he goes, please take the money and invest it as you see fit. But that was eye-opening for me. So I want to pass that on to the definitely the listeners, is understand who you're working with and how they think about investors' money. But anyway, that was my opening to the first deal with Andrew. So I met this one lady and he met this one lady. She knew my story of having the struggle with the raise for Texas that I was exiting from. And he was struggling with raising the rest of the money. So she actually put us together, said, hey, you should call Maureen. And that's how we started together.
And then the clouds opened up, the sun came out, your acne cleared up, and Angel started to sing. It was wonderful.
Well, I mean, we got one deal done. And then before that one, I think was even closed, the brokers were giving us another off-market deal because they knew we can close now. So like in brokers' eyes, it's all they want to know. Can these people close? Because the worst thing for a broker is to present an offer to a seller, recommend those people, and then have them walk away. Like that destroys the broker's reputation with those sellers.
Right.
So we were known as closers now in the Atlanta market is where I started. And so now deals were just coming to us. So yeah, it was one deal, and then 3 months later, another deal. And I never looked back. I realized I was really good at it because of my experience with smaller stuff.
So that second deal, I think I remember this story. You were at dinner with the broker and he asked you a question about the math and you did your Rain Man thing. And at the same time you
Yeah.
did the Rain Man thing, I think you picked up the creamer and poured it into your water or something.
Into my water.
Because you were doing the
Yes.
math.
You have a good memory, Brian. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you
the one. Yeah.
it's like he didn't care
Do you
that.
want me to tell us?
Yeah, he didn't care that, he could see the gears moving in there, but he didn't care so much about the creamer going in the water, but you hit the number on the head within a couple of seconds, and that's what impressed him.
Yeah, it was just so me and my partner, so we're new now at it basically, even though I had this experience. This is back in like 20, it was 2014. So we're still relatively new to the bigger game, I guess you can call it. And Atlanta wasn't really like people still didn't believe in Atlanta. It was the last major market to come out of the last recession. So they were still kind of they were willing to talk to new people, let's say. And so on the second deal, we got an off-market deal, and the VP of the company wanted to meet Andrew and I because it was an off-market deal with a very large portfolio holder. And he goes, normally we would not put anyone on an off-market deal that we haven't closed with before. So I wanted to know why this broker did that. My broker did that. And, and so he wanted to fly in. He met us for lunch and he's explaining this story. He's like, oh, I wanted to meet you guys because normally we don't deal with someone we haven't closed with before for an off market deal. And he goes, I wanted to meet. And then he looks at me, he's like, so, and me and Andrew are like, oh shit, we fooled him. Like, we look like we know what we're doing. so, um, so uh yeah, that's what we had water and coffee service came and stuff. And so he looks at me across the table and he's like, how big of a deal can you guys do? And I'm like, trying to be cool, I'm like, what do you got? He's like, how about 25? That's exactly how I was like, he's like, how about 25 million? And at the time we had closed on a $3 million property and then the next one was 6 million. So 25 million for us at the time was a huge amount. But I'm just trying to be cool. He's like 25 million. And that's when I picked up my creamer and I poured it right into my water glass. I'm like, well, I said, how many units? And I make the pour. Look at him like, and he goes 734 units. And I'm like 35 grand a door. I'm like, we could look at that. And everybody went from my water glass to, they looked back up and the guy like pulls out his phone and does the calculation. He's like, okay. So that was the creamer and the water story. That was so funny. Like, but again, it's just, I don't know. We had our stuff together. We looked the part. Uh, yeah, and we've pulled them. Just all those deals worked out good. We closed on it. Actually, we doubled that in 24 months. We doubled the value, bought it for 6 million, sold it for just over 12 million. So it worked out really good. But it was just funny. And I think that's part of the lesson is like when you're trying to figure stuff out, just keep figuring it out. Who cares if you pour your creamer in the water glass? Just keep moving forward, right? I mean, I could have went like and ran to the bathroom, like I don't know what other choice did I have, right? But yeah, it was definitely a story to remember.
Oh, my cheeks are killing me here. I'm laughing so hard. Oh God. So I love this. So I'm gonna jump ahead here. This has been wonderful.
Sure.
So this is a two-part question. So the first part is, if you could go back in time now, what advice would you give yourself as an investor? And for the newbie out there who's seeing this for the first time, hearing your Rain Man moment with the cream in the water at 25 million and having to change their pants, what advice would you give to a newbie starting out today? So first, what advice would you give to you? And then what advice would you give to a newbie?
My advice I give to me is sometimes I followed people that I thought knew. So when I started buying in Atlanta, it was the first time I worked with third-party management companies. And it took a little while before I really put my foot down and be like, no, this is the way I need you to do it. Because I used to take their advice thinking, well, maybe they know better. And in some aspects they did. They know the market. I'm from Connecticut. They've been born and raised like managing properties in Atlanta. So in some aspects they did, but when there was an issue, like I realized, like in hindsight, I kind of should have put my foot down sooner. So what I would say, I guess to summarize that, is just know yourself, like especially if you have the operations experience and stuff. I was a little hesitant to like go against their guidance or something. And then I realized like they're fluffing me. Like it's just kind of bullshit, like whatever they're saying. So in the property management realm, there is a little bit of I say like a game aspect to it, and control. So I realized I wish I had kind of held my own sooner in that. I mean, everything worked out fine. We figured stuff out, but I took people's advice that I probably shouldn't have taken when I kind of knew what the answer was myself. So that was one lesson, kind of like, your stuff, like have more confidence in that and not rely on other people that are just BSing you. Um, and I tell people to know your partners. That's so huge because, like I tell you that one story about the Texas deal, I actually had like 4 or 5 maybe false starts. And I think I have somebody looking out for me up above or something, but like there was just something happened where I didn't get in those deals and they blew up. Like so really understand who your partners are, would be the advice I'd give my younger self. Which again, I was good. I always had good partners, but I could have very easily been tripped up in the beginning and that would have killed my whole career. If I had one bad deal, by the way, that Texas deal did get raised. They did close. And then they ended up having in lawsuit, the GP had to take it over, or I'm sorry, the sponsor, like the person that raised the money, had to go and take it over. And there was a big lawsuit with somebody embezzling funds and all kinds of stuff. So I'm so lucky I trusted myself and didn't go in that deal. So make sure you understand what you don't understand, I should say. Like that would be the lesson. And then what to give somebody that's just starting, what advice? I would be that again. So many people jump into partnerships so quickly. You're like, hey, there's 4 people. We all get along great and like to go have beers and play pool after real estate events or something. But it's like, those aren't necessarily people you need to work with. So one advice I give you, if you go into any partnership, always form a JV where you each have your own LLC. Because if something goes bad, you're not all married as much, if that makes sense. So create your own LLC, create a JV company, and then each partner come into that JV company. And less partners are more like, less partners are better. Uh, the deals that I always see have so many problems, they have like 6 partners or 8 partners. So I like fewer partners, the better. Like I'll work with one person. And if there's even like a team of, I don't know, it's crazy to me. Like I never want to be on a call worrying about somebody wants purple doorknobs. Like so every deal I've done where I bring investor money into, I have to have control of it or I don't do the deal. Because sometimes people are idiots. Like I don't know what else to tell you. They make bad choices. And so I always try to limit my exposure by limiting the amount of people I partner up with.
Really, really, really good stuff. I'd never heard forming the JV as coming in as 2 separate LLCs, so that's definitely something I would look at. So entity number 1 or person number 1, part number 1 forms an LLC. Partner number 2 forms an LLC. They get a lawyer, do a contract based on who brings what to the table. And maybe it's 50-50, maybe it's 40-60. It depends. And then that is a JV, and the JV acquires XYZ.
It's very important because say someone stops performing or doing something, it's much easier to like come to the agreement of getting them out with their own LLC, because now you're all like your individual entities come in. And then you can like it, but if it's Maureen, Brian, Scott, and Steve, it's a lot harder to remove somebody because they may have like personally signed on something or did something. But with the JV, if you ever have to separate, like I can go do, that's where Forum Capital is, right? So at JVs, they call it a SPE, which is a special purpose entity that's created when you buy these larger complexes. So the buyer is the SPE or the special purpose entity. It might be like Spring Valley LLC, say. So that is the buying company. And then each of the partners come into that buying company. It's just way easier than Maureen being involved in that SPE. And again, if something ever goes bad, you still have an extra shield there, right? So it's just extra protection. And or if you want to exit, just be like, hey guys, you know what? I don't like what you're doing here. I'm out. Then you could exit easier too, because your LLC kind of works as the in between. So it's just a good safeguard. I guess it's easier to get divorced if you all come in with LLCs.
So I get it. There's husbands and wives in this thing. And the JV is, if I wanted to call it, would be the marriage, but you could substitute in and out within the JV. So the JV stays whole in the deal. And then, you know, if I have a life event and I need to get out, or somebody else has 300 million that they need to burn and want to come in, you know, then all that can happen behind the curtain on the JV. Is that right?
It is right too, Brian. And also, say you took a partner and you formed, ABC LLC, and
Sure.
then maybe you're like, all right, I've done 3 deals with this guy, and it's cool. Like, I'll finish my deals, but I don't want to work with him anymore. Maybe something happened. Maybe he's not as active as he was, or whatever. Then you're not like, so you did a JV called, ABC LLC with this guy, but then Brian Lucier LLC is over here, that comes as part of that. And then Brian Lucier can go JV with Maureen. We can do a JV over here. So you're still holding your own company that's like protected, I should say. And then you JV in other partnerships is the best way, is what I found. Like when people get into it, and it doesn't, again, it doesn't mean that there has to be something bad that happens, but maybe you want to do an extra deal like with me. Maybe we're going to do a side deal. So you're like, well, do I need to involve my whole 5 partners that I had in ABC LLC? No. So start your own LLC and then bring that LLC into each JV. That's my recommendation
I like that.
for a lot of reasons. I could probably talk a whole day on the reasons for that.
Well, I mean, like I said, every show I learned something, and this is what I'm grabbing out of this one. Yeah, I think I like Blue Starfish LLC. That kind of like resonates with me at this moment.
It could be BSF LLC, Blue Starfish. Yeah.
Maybe not Blue Starfish. I'll have to think of something else because BS looks so funny.
Oh, that's true.
I want to go back to you challenging the property managers in Georgia. Like, I know you've got that spider sense, right? You're like, your nose twitches. You can tell something's weird in the room.
I have good intuition for sure.
Yeah, really, really good intuition.
Yeah.
So they're selling you this Kool-Aid. The Kool-Aid tastes funny. You know the Kool-Aid tastes funny. Can you describe to me that moment when you stood up and said, hey, the Kool-Aid tastes funny, or I don't see the emperor's clothes? Like,
Well, it's just things like, I mean, there are just some stories where the man, like, say they're short on leasing for a month, and they'll be like, well, um, I don't know, it's a slow month for this. I'm like, okay, but did we try this, and this? Or like, well, you guys aren't, advertising correctly, or the manager wasn't there half the time. That's something that property management companies do that I found is they'll take, especially if you have a good manager, sometimes they'll push them to other properties or sometimes help other properties that are struggling, but you're paying for that full manager or leasing agent or whatever it is. And so it's like saying, no, like I'm keeping my own person here. Like they do not leave my property. I'm paying them. And I'd be so hands-on in the beginning too, that I'd be training these people myself. And, but if they say, oh, like, sorry, like advertising is just slow. It's like, well, you guys aren't doing these 5 things, or they would kind of just give you a story. And it's like, okay, but I know what I'm talking about. So like, no, we need to do this, and this. Or they'd want to run some crazy rental special to say, hey, let's give away 2 months for free. And I was like, well, we could do that, but maybe it's better just having my leasing agent in the office all the time. Like maybe that's a better move. So it's just things like that. Like, yeah. And so and again, it's just realizing where the fluff comes in or where the stories come in. And I'm not saying like property management is the most difficult job there is. So I don't want to sound too rough on them, but a good manager is going to make, but she can make a bad property great, and a bad manager could make a great property really freaking bad fast. So it's all about the management really in operations and how these properties perform. And you just have to know, and you know, and like I remember one of my maintenance guys, because again, I could build a house from the ground up myself. I know all this stuff. I remember him saying to one of the new guys, like, don't ever, and in the South, they say Miss Maureen. That's what they go, like, don't ever lie to Miss Maureen because she'll catch you. She knows. And like it was, so that was pretty funny. When
Good.
some of my maintenance guys were reporting that to me, like Ryan warned them, don't ever lie to me because she knows. So it's don't fluff her.
Well, at the same time, because you do know your stuff, you've got their back, right? Because if they hit the wall,
Oh,
you bring something to the table. So they're going to trust and respect you.
yeah, and I'm always big like with my property managers and like the maintenance guys say, hey, if there's a tool you need that helps you do something and makes your job easier, like let me know. Like I don't know how many Home Depot runs I used to make when I was in town. I mean, it's like, oh, if I only had a compound miter saw, like I could fix that trim myself. We don't, I've had maintenance guys that call, oh my God, like this one guy he called out, we're riding in the golf cart, I'm checking the property going up and down. I'm like, oh, I see like we have black doors. There's like a big like caulk line down this door. And I'm like, and they were wooden doors. So I think they were just sealing anything if it swells and shrinks down in Atlanta. So they were just like sealing it. I'm like, oh, like why didn't we paint that? Like when was that done? And he's like, oh, I have it being bid out. Like you're bidding out painting that door black, dude, like a full-time guy on 100 units. And he wasn't that busy. He used to piss me off because he always had these clean boots. His boots were brand new and like clean. I'm like, sorry, my maintenance guy should not have freaking clean shoes every single time I'm in town. Like, so it's just those clues, right? You learn what to look for. And so he's like, I'm like, you bid out painting the black doors. I'm like, dude, I could get it taken care of myself in 30 seconds. Like, what are you doing? And so I made now this is so I made the manager make him, he had to paint every door in that whole complex. So every day he had so many doors to paint, and that was his like job. As soon as he get in, he'd paint the friggin' doors. It just pissed me off because I'm like, here we're bidding out painting a door. It's just somebody being lazy. So it's just learning stuff like that over time. You learn the tricks, and so, and again, some things are legit and some things just aren't. So, so I could talk a month on that too, Brian. So
Well, hey, we're going to be around a while. We got a couple more years. We can actually do another show when you hit 6,800 units, and I'll make sure.
sure.
So we're gonna jump ahead, and that was really, really good stuff. So yeah, definitely push back if you know your stuff and you think someone's fluffing you. And then I love that whole JV with the LLCs and interchangeable, and like being able to take this entity, play with that person, you're not locked in. I love that. And
Mhm.
yeah, I would love to play with you on another property and another deal, but we can take that offline at another time. Next I have here, this is a fun part for me, and I know you're going to have a great story here. What was the best deal you ever did? What type of property was it? How did you find it? And how did you finance it?
Oh man. So okay, this one's kind of a crazy story, but definitely the best deal I ever did. So I bought a lot in a town outside of Atlanta, one of the tertiary markets I was buying. And it was a deal that I guess it was like 2019 or 2020. But the market was pretty hot then. But there was a property that was actually coming up for auction. And a bunch of people knew I was buying in that area. So I got calls from like one of the contractors I use. I got call from a guy that just knew I bought in the area. I got calls from I think a broker or two. And it was like in the paper that this property is going to be auctioned, 155 units. The note on it was only 1.8 million, which again, if you do the math, that's what, the 12 grand a unit or something like that. So so the note was going up for auction. I happened to know the lender that held the note, and I called them like, what's the deal with this property? And they said what happened was it was a lady, it was actually the owner died and left it to the property manager, which is pretty cool, right? So she had this property for the last 6 or 8 years, however long it was. And now the loan termed out. So the term came, and maybe it was a 10-year note or something, and it termed out. She didn't have the ability to refinance it or to get a loan on it. So you to do that, you need typically operations experience, which I'm sure she had, but you need a net worth and you need liquidity. Like those are the three legs of the table that a lender wants to see. But she didn't have that. So even though she had this 155 unit property for only like, again, $1.8 million note, she didn't have the knowledge, I guess, to go get a partner. Like I didn't know what the deal is, but they go, no, the property's not bad. There's a lot of equity in it. They said, no, Maureen, just when it goes to auction, we're buying it. Like the lender's going to take it over. That it's not really going to sell. And I was like, huh, okay. So what I did is, so we had all these people after this property. Now we knew the lender was going to take it at 1.8 million, which was nothing for this property. So I ended up reaching out to the owner because he did slip one little thing. He said even though it's in receivership, which means they contract with a property management company to take over the operation. So they're doing the collections now, they're doing the management of it. She still maintained the right to sell it. So what happened with this particular deal, and this is like a unicorn deal, but again, here you have hot market 2019, 2020. She only owes 1.8. Probably could have easily sold for 4 times that or something in the market. But again, she didn't know. She ignored the letters. So this foreclosure really, like, the thing tripped up like 18 months ago. It's been that long to now they're getting to foreclosure where they're ready to like sell the property on the courthouse steps. Anyway, I get a hold of the owner, and there's about 15 people, like heavy hitters, going after this property. And I told him, like, hey, what if I give you 2.6 for it? Can you sell it? Because if she sells it before it's auctioned, that's okay. Then it's sold. But the thing is that she's like, well, it's going to be auctioned in 10 days. So I had literally 10 days to close on this. 2.65 million is what I offered her for it. And I couldn't do a full due diligence on it because she didn't have access to the property anymore. The lender wasn't allowing access because they wanted the property. And again, we had all these other people trying to bid on the property. So I couldn't do a full due diligence. So for me, it was super risky. I just happened to be selling a portfolio, and I was making like, I literally asked my kids, I'm like, hey, what do you guys have in your bank accounts? What do you have in your, because I was getting so close on raising this 2.65. I had to close in 10 days. So I was just pulling it from everywhere I had it. And I put 200,000 down on it hard. Because again, she had other people asking, but everybody's offering her the 1.8. Nobody else thought of offering her an extra 800K for it that she can actually walk away with money. So she was willing to sell it to me, which is awesome. I gave her the hard money, and I had a deal that was closing like 4 days before, and that would have given me enough money, a profit on my end, to close on this thing. So it was like the most stressful thing ever because here I was short money. I was asking some of my investors, I'm like, hey, if I need a note just for like 2 months, I give you a point a month. So anyway, we could talk about raising money. But so I had some of my investors that maybe could line up as a backup. But like if this property didn't sell, I wasn't 100% sure I could come up with all the money. So I had 200K hard, which is a ton of money. But I ended up getting it. I ended up buying it for 2.65. And yeah, I come to find out when I did due diligence, it was not bad at all, which was great. It was risky. And again, I didn't want to involve investors in it as like a piece. I would have done like a personal note for them, but I wouldn't have involved them because I couldn't do due diligence. I didn't know if it looked like inside. I didn't know what the interiors. I could see the outside. It was there. It looked like people lived there. Like I could see some things, but we got in there and it was a good property. And yeah, I ended up selling it for $9.4 million 24 months later after putting 800K in it. So, and again, that was with no investors involved. I was able to do that one myself, which was pretty cool. So that was my best one.
Damn. So I'm going to just break down the numbers here because I love this part of the show. So how did you find it? Network. Okay. This thing appeared like it was exploding on your network. People knew about it. The owner left it to the property manager. Property manager was getting deluged with letters and offers, but you did something unique. You stepped up to the plate, I'm guessing with an all cash offer, above what she needed. So she took your offer.
Mhm.
How did you get the money? You shook out all the piggy banks you could find, and
Yeah.
you banked on this 2.65 coming within 4 days of that 10 days, and hopefully the check cleared in time to get through that. And then 155 units, which was originally at the 1.8 was 11,600 per unit. You ended up purchasing it at 17K per unit, and you disposed of
Yeah.
it at how much?
9.475 is what we sold it for.
Oh, this is the part I love. But I need a calculator. I don't have milk and water here.
2.5, yeah, 3.475. So about, yeah, I guess it was 6 million, about just about, so I put 800,000 into it too. So
Wow.
yeah, about, yeah, $6 million, right? Almost
Well,
exactly.
you sold it at
Yeah.
61,129 a door.
Yeah. Which was a good deal too. Like there was still some meat on the bone too. So and again, we could talk about that, but like sometimes this story of what could be done to a property is better than actually the execution of it. It sounds a little funny, but like sometimes you don't want to renovate 100 units or 100% of the units. You want to renovate 10% of the units, show that income, and then sell it with, people take that other 90% in their numbers, which again is a little risky, depending if they can execute or not. But like, so there was still meat on the bone, as we call it.
Meat on the bone. You had a whole cow left over. How many years? How many years did it take you before you
two
did
years,
2 years? All
two
right,
years.
killing
Yeah,
me. And you put 800K into it. So your net on that,
800.
you were at 61. You sold it at 61. A door. You bought it at 17.
Mm-hmm.
44K in profit per door, which is 6.8 million. The 8 that you put into it, you only cleared 3 million a year on that. You poor thing.
Yeah, it was a good deal. Like I said, that was kind of a unicorn deal. But again, you got to show up, you got to be in the game, you got to participate, you got to be in the market you're at. Like, I'm always like meeting the police in the market we're in, or I don't know, all the brokers, and stepping foot in there and being around. So it's just being active that gets you deals like that. And then knowing how to pursue it, and I like it, and just thinking outside the box. Like if I was that lady and I have all these people that are offering to take it off my hands for what I own it for, like, but hey, it's still a good deal for me if I pay her, the 800K I guess she walked away with. So for her, I mean, it's great. Now this lady has a little bit of a nest egg for herself,
Sure.
and I get the deal. So it's, yeah. I just remember she was like, stop dead on the phone. I said, like, what if I pay you 800,000 over? She's like it just like stopped her debt. So, but just like put yourself in the seller's position for something like that. And
So this is the unbelievable part, the part I love on the show, right? So you were clearing $250,000 profit a month.
Oh yeah, yeah, well, that's a little fun game I play with myself, Brian. I got to tell you, is I used to think like even when I'd work per hour, like what I would make every minute. So it's like if I have to go to the restroom, like wow, they just paid me $7 to go pee. Like it's just like it's just this little game I'd always have, and so I used to break it down like per day what I made. And you're right. So I love that you're doing that. So it's okay. It's 250K a month, which you're absolutely right. And then like how much is that a day? So it's going to be less than uh 10 grand a day, but it's what is it, like 8,700 a day or something like that? Like
Eight $8,333,
okay,
three to infinity a
a
day.
day. Yeah. So 8,300 a day. And then okay, we could break that down by hour now. So I'm sleeping and working. Like, and
That's
so that's a way to have fun with it too. It's like, whoa, just for, and I didn't really have to, well, I guess I did have to get out of bed to do that. I'm always like, wow, I make this much and I don't even have to get out of bed to do that. But that I did. It was a little we were active on that, but it was worth it for sure.
so in 50 days, or even in 60 days of you owning that property at $1,041.66 to infinity an hour,
Oh, there you go.
at 50 hours, at 1 week, with a little bit of overtime, you earned what a college grad is stepping out of the door with maybe 200K in debt. Or
Well, you know what's magic about this is, again, I didn't have money when I started, but I was a hard worker and I knew construction costs. I knew how to operate. And so it made me good at what I'm doing, but it doesn't mean that anyone necessarily needs that skill. You just get a partner that you're confident knows that stuff, right? And I really think I don't think there's a way to legally make more money than in this business. Like, because that wasn't the only project I did. In 2019, I think we bought almost 16 projects. So we had a lot of stuff going on. That's just one project. So, and then once you get the right team together, which takes a little while, and there's a lot of the BS you got to go through and figure out, do they really know what they're talking about? Should I listen to them? Can they get in my brain and understand? But like and it's slowly, right? You rotate through people. It's kind of a numbers game. And I thought when I have to get rid of somebody, I'm like, well, I'm one step closer to finding the right person, is what I tell myself, right? So, but as you get those teams, like by then, I had a construction company already all structured. I had a guy that was running it for me. So the rehab took a huge amount off my shoulders, because even though I'd still go with him and we'd make the plan out, I didn't have to see, oh, did the roofers get it done on time? Like, he knew the timeline. So, this was like 5 years now of running a portfolio where I had a lot of the team in place. So for me, like you say, when you're buying something at 18 grand a door in 2019, I'm pretty sure I bought that. It doesn't, like, I'm like, I don't even care if all the rooms are gutted. Like, I'm gonna make money at it, as long as people physically live there, there's water and sewer there and power. Like, I'm good. Like, I could deal with anything. So that's just a win-win. And I did buy another auction deal that year as well. I paid 1 million. I was actually with my acquisitions guy. We were driving between Tennessee and Atlanta on the highway when the thing was going up. It was like 10x auction or auction.com or whatever it was called at the time. But I remember thinking it was 64 units. It was right in the same area too, but it was 64 units. I said, okay, I'll bid up to 1 million on it. And I had the cash. And I'm like, okay. And so I sent one of my property managers from a nearby property, like, you drive this address. I only found out about it the night before. I'm like, can you drive this address? And she drives it in the morning, but I'm like not hearing from her. And the auction starts at like noon. And I'm like, her name's Lindsay. I'm like, Lindsay, I'm like, I'm calling her on the phone. I'm like, did you go? Like, what? And she goes, oh yeah, Maureen. She goes, it's rough though. I'm like, okay, but do people live there? Like, just, do people like do they live there? Like, is there water? Is there sewer? Is there power? Are there roofs on it? Or does it look like a nuclear bomb hit it? Like, that's all I really need to know. She's like, yeah, people live there. And I'm like, okay, done. Because for that price, like, you can't go wrong. I mean, and it sounds crazy, but like, you really can find these deals still. And it was rough. Everything needed roofs. There were people we had to leave, get out. There was some units we had to totally gut, but I ended up selling that one for 2.6 million 2 years later as well. And I think I put 450,000 in that. That's it. So I made those two deals were like my auction kind of deals, but that's what I think is coming too, Brian. I think more deals like that, not today, they're not here yet. There's a lot of owners that aren't making investor payments. They're in trouble with a term loan that's coming up. They need to refi or sell, and they're not going to be able to. So they stop putting money into the units. A lot of units aren't being turned right now. So we're going to see, occupancy dropping, vacancy rising. And it's, deferred maintenance is building. I think every day as we get closer to that time when, maybe lenders aren't so gracious. I know a lot of lenders, they don't want to get stuck with the properties too. They don't want to own these properties. So they'll work with owners. But I think it's coming, like, where these kinds of opportunities will come up, and they're not going to be in class A. I mean, it's going to be in class C. So I became really good at flipping properties and having problem properties to turn them around. I do that with, it's always like the perimeter. So we make sure there's no like fence holes, and we use something called expanded metal. The police used to call it expensive metal because it is pricey, but it's like this metal, this type of fence that they can't cut through. So like, we secure the perimeter, we get a gate if it warrants it, but lighting, a lot of these properties that have trouble is lighting, and then security cameras. And I always make friends with the local police and give them the security codes so they can actually watch stuff when they need to. And man, like, how fast we could turn properties around is outstanding. Like, I just, so anyway, I don't mind a rougher property where maybe somebody wasn't doing background checks like they should have done, or doing some stuff. So some of the properties we got in were a little bit rougher, but again, there's a lot of money to be made, and we're doing the right thing, right? We're cleaning up the area. We're making, sometimes there's like older tenants at these locations, and you're thinking like, or sometimes people think, well, if they don't want to live there, they can move. But some of these tenants, like I've had properties, the oldest one, she was there from 1978, like this to one tenant in this one unit. And I'm like, she's not going to move. The property went through its ups and downs of, being in a dangerous area and then coming around and somebody takes care of it and then it drops again. But, we go in with no nonsense. So we actually like make the property safer for the tenants, and they appreciate it. Like it takes us typically about 60 days and we'll get the property under control. But anyway, a lot of money to be made if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work and find the opportunity.
So I want to plug in the last couple numbers here. Purchase
Sure.
2.6, you bought it at 15,625 a unit. You ended up selling it, making a profit of 25,000 per unit, which gave you 1.6 million. What was your rehab?
That one, I think about 450,000 on that one. So it was less than 10 a door.
And what was your hold before disposition?
I'm sorry, what was my what?
Months, years, how long did you hold it before you sold it?
Oh, that was also 2 years, right about 24 months.
You were only clearing about 48,000 a month on that one.
Yeah, and those properties were near each other too. They weren't far away. So as we're doing one, like, one of the reasons that the renovation costs were so low is actually, I think we had another one, but it was a normal syndication deal. Well, like when you order, instead of ordering maybe, I don't know, 500 windows, when you're ordering 2,500 windows, because we're doing all these things, like our costs come way down. So that's the reason I actually started the construction company, is just really to get that bulk buying of those costs. And when you tell a roofing company, hey, come on out, I have 4 complexes that I need roofing on, again, costs come way down. So that's part of the reasons I was able to turn those so cheaply, is because I stayed in the market. Not just another note is I don't like to get into a market where I can't buy at least 1,000 units. And it's for that reason. It's like that's one regional overseeing your properties. But when you can get enough of a bulk amount of things going, that's enough to get a good deal on a landscaper. That's enough to get a good deal on security cameras or something, because you're doing a few complexes, not just 164 unit out in, who knows where, just out isolated. So it's easier to get bulk pricing or to know somebody that is also in that area. So if you have a friend that has 800 units, I did that with an area in Indiana that I bought for flooring, because we got some discount flooring done because I used his 800 units. I had like 950 units. We put those together and kind of made a bulk deal for the 1,700 units.
Nice, partnering with your neighbors. So I'm just gonna put the spotlight back on these two deals for a second, because the numbers look wonderful.
Okay.
I mean, everybody is probably drooling, saying, wow, you made 250,000 a month on one. You made almost 70,000 a month on the other. But that's just the money. That does not, that's the disposition. This does not take into account depreciation, does not take into account cash flow, does not take into account that bright idea that you just had, partnering with other people, getting your costs down. You could have done cost segregation. There's so many other layer on layer on layer that would have made this base layer of the cake just like a fantastic event, like a dessert.
Real estate's good, Brian. I'm telling you.
It's tasty. It's really tasty. So yeah, I mean, we're just looking at your purchase and your disposition, and like, this is a blown away number. It's like people in the real world can't make this kind of money. But we're not even factoring all the fun stuff, all those other perks that you get, being a business owner, the expenses, the depreciation. I mean, everything else, your brother in between. I mean, having to get that Chevy Silverado Denali because you have to drive to the properties and you're writing it all off. I mean, all this wonderful, fun stuff that sounds like lifestyles of the rich and famous, but I'm sure we're not on the camera. We're both wearing jeans and t-shirts, right? So
it's like the opposite of lifestyles of the rich and famous. I gotta tell you,
Here's your
like
plunger.
it's not anything like rich and famous. It's the exact opposite of it. Yeah, yeah,
Here's your
yeah.
plunger. And Mom, we're going out for ice cream. Do we need to bring the screwdriver and the flashlight again?
Oh, so you wanna solve your riddle now? Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's a
let's do
that's
it.
a
Yeah, the lifestyles of the rich and famous. Why don't you tell us how that all started out with the ice cream trip?
Yeah, so my kids they just grew up around this because I was doing it since they were very young. And like I said, I had some back problems for a while. So like my son and daughter, they used to paint the lower trim on some of these rehabs because I just couldn't bend down. Like it was torturous. So they've always been part of it. And I tell them like you guys know more than what you think. And so because again, it's just like breathing to them. Like they understand renovation. They've been part of it forever. Um, so when they were little in Connecticut, sometimes I go by houses that were empty, and like in hindsight, this is probably I don't recommend this because it's in hindsight, I think what the hell was I doing? But like literally, we like, hey guys, you want to go for ice cream? And they're like, do we need a screwdriver and a flashlight? Because that means we like on the way we'd be looking at some like maybe an abandoned house that I found or something that would be a good flip. And yeah, we like I've and again, don't recommend this, but I've literally like jacked open the window and then popped the kids in to go unlock the door so we can go see some abandoned house. So again, in hindsight, there could have been a lot of things in the house, and I don't recommend that. But at the time, I guess I just didn't realize the risk. But it all worked out. We never had an issue. But that's the joke. And some of the people that have known me for a while when I first started. And again, the kids, the kids were involved. I have so many stories, Brian, about stuff like that. Like it's it's I'm not proud of every moment. We do the best we can. It's it's
Kids,
part of you just do it, right? You figure stuff out.
that was a great deal, kids. You can have 3 scoops of ice cream tonight
Yeah.
with
Oh my
Jimmy.
gosh. Yes. Some
Yeah,
of the stuff. Yeah.
Jimmy's
But
is
it worked out. It all worked out.
yeah. For those people watching it in other areas of the country, Jimmy's is a New England thing. You get the sprinkles on the ice cream. Jimmy's are the sprinkles that are only chocolate. So it's a New England thing. Yeah, I love that story, and I've heard so many of stories, and they just burned in my head, and I remember them. And I'm telling you, I am in tears today. This is so much fun. Um, so fantastic, loved your stories. I'm going to jump ahead here now, and then get myself a tissue to dry my eyes. What was what was the biggest hurdle you had to overcome as an investor, and how did you solve it?
Biggest hurdle I had to overcome as an investor. You mean as an owner and operator, I'm assuming, right?
Just
When you say
playing
investor, just real.
just playing the game of real estate. What was one of the biggest hurdles you had, and how did you get there?
Um, One of the lessons I learned early on, actually, was from my very first raise. Excuse me, my very first raise is only a $1.1 million raise, but I had one investor. There's like 600,000 available for room, so probably the 500K was raised. So I had one investor come in and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to take that whole 600K. I have this thing. I have to invest in something, yada, yada, yada." And so I called my partner and I'm like, "Cool. Like, I just finished the raise. That's cool. I got one guy for 600K. That's awesome." And then, so we kind of stopped raising, right? So then 2 weeks later, when it comes time to wrap up all his paperwork and get his investor, he's like, "Oh, I talked to my real estate coach and they think I should only put 50K in the deal." And I mean, honestly, that was a good move. It was my first deal. So nothing I say, but what that taught me is that unless I've worked with an investor, number one, I never let an investor come in for more than an amount that I can replace if they bail. So if I have $500,000 sitting in the bank, somebody could come in for $500,000 that I don't know. And okay, because I can fill that spot temporarily if I need to close, right? But as a brand new person, again, I didn't have that at all. So never let anybody in. So I would say 100, let's do 100 grand this time. Let's make sure you like me, I like you, and it's cool. Let's just, I understand you want to put 600K in, but let's do 100,000. So that's what I've learned is just always take smaller amounts from people the first time, because then they can't trip you up. And that's where a lot of people come short they're short at closing because somebody had cold feet or somebody got sick in their family or, who knows what happens. But when you're relying on a giant investor to come in, that's like a lot of times a deal killer for people when they don't show up. And that happens a lot. Like when you get people say, yeah, I'm in the deal, especially early on, you maybe half of the people actually do it. Like now with my investors, just be like, hey, I got a deal. I got a deal. We're doing due diligence on it next week. Just want to put the heads out, just a heads up is what I do with my investors once we get something under LOI. Like, hey guys, we're gonna go due diligence next week. We'll let you know it's a deal. And right now they'll be like, I want 300K, I want 400K. I'm like, do you want to know what state it's in? They're like, don't care. So my investors are just like, now that we do it, and they fill up immediately, so we don't have to worry. But in the very beginning, that was a huge lesson for me on my first property. And luckily it was a small enough number, and I had enough other people interested. We were still able to close in time. But in another situation, that could have been much different. Because sometimes you will say, oh, I have $2 million sitting, or my mom has $2 million. We'll go in that deal. That'll be awesome. And then they just ghost you. So never don't take a large investor unless you've worked with them before. Because also, if they're a big jackass, actually, you don't want to. Like, I've had investors before, like, oh, I heard you're raising another deal. I'm like, oh, dude, sorry, it's full. Like, it's like, no, you're just not coming in my deal again. Like, no, I don't need to be tortured, or you tortured my people. Like, I'm done. Um,
Uh,
so that's my lesson. Until you work with somebody, just and let them in for a small amount.
So that triggered something in my memory here, which a lot of things trigger in my memory. If someone had come in and actually invested more than 20%, I don't know if this is part of the raise, if they put in more than 20% of the raise, some of the institutions may actually want them to sign on the note.
That's true. So they call them a key KP, a key person. So if they come in with over, yeah, sometimes it's usually 20%. I've seen 25, I've seen 15. So depending on the lender, the type of loan, things like that, they'll want to know. And that is correct. Yeah. And we always keep it under too. I don't do that just because I never want anyone to like tell me I either have to sell a property, or tell me that we have to hold a property, or like I don't do anything unless I have full control over it. Because yeah, because I trust myself. I know I'll always do right on the investors, and sometimes people are after their own personal agenda kind of thing. So I don't let key people in there. And I mean, there really isn't a need for it. So just keep them under 20. That's all. And
That's a good rule of thumb, and another nice little golden nugget for anyone who's out there raising the money. What you just offered there is like, man, it's like giving up control of the deal, your baby. It's like, yeah, don't
yeah.
lose sight of what you're giving up for the money that you're asking for. We're
Right. And I guess I got one more tip for you I'd love to share, because it really saved my butt when I needed it. One of the other tips I'd give to your listeners is, when and if you ever do use a third party management, make sure you're always a signer on the accounts. Yeah, so not just a user. A lot of times a property management company will set it up, the accounts, and then add you to it so you have visuals. Make sure you're actually a signer on it. It's a big distinction, a user versus a signer. Make sure you're a signer. When I wanted to shift and fire a property management company, we were in the process, and normally when they set it up, they did not have signers, but we insisted on being a signer. So we set up our own accounts. And then what happened is, when we wanted to shift, what they came back to me and they said, oh, okay, we can do that, but we're holding all of your deposits for 2 months. They weren't going to pay my bills. They weren't going to do anything. So, and that at the time was about $4 million worth of cash, which I couldn't have covered. But because I was a signer on the accounts, because they're saying we're not going to release any money because we have to make sure we pay the vendors for you, which is kind of a bunch of bullshit. So we went and we like withdrew all the money out of the accounts and went and set up different accounts for the company. But that could have buried me too. Like, they might have had me hostage and I wouldn't have been able to shift property management companies. But because we were signers, we were able to go take all the money out and shift it, and then pay them for the vendor bills they paid, like reimburse them. But otherwise they would have had us hostage. So just a very important note. I want to, because I never heard it before, and we just always made that rule, and it worked out for us. But that's something that really could have tripped us up.
more gold. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
So we're getting almost to the end here. Was there Yeah, another 3 hours we'll be done. Was there a book in your real estate investing career that had a huge impact on you?
Honestly, like a lot of people, Rich Dad Poor Dad shifted my brain and the way I thought about money. As we would as the kids were growing up and I was trying to teach them lessons in money after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, if they think of money as a tool as opposed to like the thing people need, like so many people are after money, right? But it's not really money we want. What do we want? We want choices. We want freedom. We want things we can buy. It's just like a tool. It's like if you have a hammer, you can use a hammer on a lot of different things. But that's kind of how I learned to look at money, where it's just a tool to something else. So like when my people, so my kids have always been involved with the company. They still are. They both work for me full time, even though they're in their late 20s. And so when they were kids, I'd be like, hey guys, maybe we take like a $50 bill and like go get their friends would be over. So maybe we go pick up some pizzas. I'd be like, watch guys, we're gonna fool them. We're gonna get this little piece of paper and they're gonna give us 3 pizzas. Like, isn't that cool? So it kind of like it's a tool, right? We could do different things with this money. So anyway, that Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of thinking as money as something you can multiply, something that is just a resource, just like a bunch of hammers and nails, or I don't know, whatever. It's just, but that really showed me that just it taught me to think differently about money. Um,
Shifted that whole, not diet.
yeah, what's the word?
I'll figure it out later.
Yeah,
Paradigm. Paradigm. 20.
paradigm. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Hongju.
So there's a joke that Hanju doesn't like me telling, but how was copper wire invented? Her and her sister found a penny.
Wow.
But she's very good with the money, so I'm not knocking her. So in your investing career, was there a second book that had an influence on you?
I read that like the ABCs of investing a long time ago before I got started in this. And for me, when I said I worked as a network engineer, I was on the Asia duty, like so I'd work weird hours compared to the US. And like once I'd have certain things done, like my job was done. So I had a little bit of extra time on the internet and stuff like that. And I used to just there was a website called Mr. Landlord. I don't know if they're even around anymore, but I used to
Oh,
read
yeah.
their Q&A. It was very active. And I did that for years as I'm dreaming of like I might own one of these big buildings one day. And so I'd always like read everything I could. I would be on like things like this. So I said I think I have the knowledge of like 120-year-old little real estate lady, like a landlord lady, because I read those things. Like I read stories about bed bugs. I read stories about what people did with dogs that shouldn't be like all. So you gain this knowledge, right? So I mean, just it becomes almost an obsession, I think, to do it correctly. Is you have to be a little bit obsessed with it because it's not always fun. There's a little bit of a roller coaster, right? But even when it's not fun, it's still kind of fun. Like if you can have that attitude,
Yeah.
you'll do well. So the more stuff you read, it's all those experiences. And somebody told me like when you read a book, you're taking like a lifetime of somebody's knowledge condensed for you to absorb, right? So how cool is that? So I'd always like anything I get my hands on, I would always read, listen to, I would listen to podcasts. And that's one of the reasons I do things like this, Brian, too. There's nothing I'm trying to get from this. Like I know if people like you weren't sharing stories from people like me, like I would never have had the chance to do this because you don't get out of school knowing, oh, I want to be a real estate syndicator. Like you don't even know that's like like I had no awareness that that was even possible until I stumbled across that private money course where they talked about it. So I just thank you for doing what you do because I mean it changed my life for sure. I'm the first really entrepreneur in my family, and I there's so much stuff you can do with this now. I wanted to put my son through school without having debt, like, and he did that. He graduated from college. Getting my mom her first new car ever, like that was pretty cool. Yeah, if I keep going, I'm gonna start like, but it's done a lot for me and my family. And it's cool having that again as a tool, right? It's just I used to say it's like having extra sandwiches and you're sharing sandwiches with people. Like that's all it is.
Well, I have to thank you for bringing it to the table because without your story, the show wouldn't be here. So I really want to thank you. And for anyone on the air who's trying to find it, Jeffrey Taylor is Mr. Landlord. Jeff Taylor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't think I even knew that. I
yeah,
just did.
yeah, we had him as a speaker once. He's really tall.
That's right. Really tall, but
Yes.
awesome website. I hope it's still rolling. What I loved is how active his Q&A part of his site was. So I would just read all these crazy stories, like, and anyone that's a landlord know you could write a book about
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
that you never even imagined would happen. And so they're like, you could read through those stories and, you know, what they do or how they, I don't know, solve the issue. It's very valuable.
In his newsletter, it was white with green ink. I always remember I used to love getting those, and I'd peel them apart and say, oh, what's up this month? So this is the curveball question that was not on your list. What question did I not ask you today that I should have asked you to have on the show? What question should I have asked you that I didn't?
I don't know. I I didn't look at the list of questions before, so there was no. I apologize. I probably should have. I do better shooting from
Oh,
the hip. Yeah. I guess a lot of people say is, you know, what would you just say to somebody that's just starting? And we went over that, like what lesson would you share with them or something? But what I want to kind of tell people now, so we're in March of 2024. Who knows when you're going to find this or come across this? But you know, a lot of people have been wanting to get into multifamily over the last few years, and they get discouraged because like they're like, I don't understand like what I'm doing wrong. I can't find a deal. And you know, I haven't bought anything for 2 years now. Back we had some projects coming to an end in 2021, and the prices I was getting for those projects were like 25% more than what I really expected to exit at and what I really think the property is worth. But I had 15, 20 offers. It's not like I had one group that was paying way too much, right? 15, 20 offers on these properties. So I'm like, I think it's time we just hit the exit. Anything I didn't want to hold for at least 5 years, I sold. I put on the market. So I sold like 85% of the portfolio between middle of 2021, and we exited, like, I think the last sale was February of 2022. And that's when all of a sudden interest rates started spiking, I think like 2 months later. And like, so I would have lost, it was like $160 million portfolio. So I would have lost, you know, probably a good 20-25% if I waited. So my lesson to you guys, and why I share this story, is that if you've been trying to get into a deal and can't figure out what you're doing, why you can't get in a deal, it's because there are a lot of idiots out there paying way too much money for deals, and you don't want to compete with those people. So hold your own all the time. If the numbers don't make sense, don't do the deal. I say it's better to miss an opportunity than to get burnt on a deal. So even if you missed it, if somebody came in and bought it and sold it for way more, you're like, damn, I should have went higher. Like, it's better to live to fight another day, right? So these last 2 years, I think anybody that bought, I guarantee you, anybody that bought anything the last 2 years has had some sleepless nights. There's some crazy stuff going on out there. But on a good note, that's opportunity coming for you. So know your numbers, like know how to underwrite in the area that you're focused in, you know, because every area is different. Some water can vary huge amounts, just different policies and different things you have to do to evict people. So like get an area that you want to really dive into and understand those numbers, and just keep underwriting, because when a good deal does come across, you'll know it. If it's the first deal you're underwriting, you're not even going to know if it's a good deal. So I'd say find an area or maybe a couple areas and just start underwriting every deal. And it's okay if they don't work right now. Even though there's some opportunities that I'm seeing surface, I think there's a lot more coming towards the end of the year and maybe even next year. So if you haven't bought in the last 2 years and you've been trying, I want to say congratulations for sticking with your numbers, because there's a lot of people that wish they did stick to their numbers. I guarantee you coming up in the next 12 to 24 months. So now's the time to get educated and really know what a good deal looks like. So that when you do come across that good deal, you're solid, you know, it's a good deal. I hope that answers your question, Brian. It's probably a long answer for a short question.
No, for a question that didn't exist, that was a brilliant answer, because, you know, it answers the question of like kind of where the market's going and, you know, commercial interest rates and all that. Some of these people, we've even seen some large complexes, like hundreds of units coming up for foreclosure already, because that 5-year note commercial is time to renew, and it's a different deal now because the interest is different and the numbers aren't there. So, yeah, I think you're spot on. Within the next year or so, we're going to see some wonderful opportunities for folks like us to pull up the truck and just buy. So I know,
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm
no,
sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
ladies
Now,
first.
it'll probably be a 15-minute explanation, so just go ahead. You're
Well,
good. You're good. Go
hey, this is your show. Please
ahead.
share your insights. I'm sure it'll help some.
No, I just want to say, like, in the market now, there are some deals popping up. There are some opportunities, but what I found is there's still like 20 people fighting over them, which is driving it beyond. There's 20 people fighting. I'm like, there's always gonna be one idiot willing to pay too much, and I don't want to do that. So I never get in bidding wars on deals either. That's one of my things. Like, I'll do off market deals, but I'm not going to compete against six other people, because then if I get it, I'm like, oh, what I miss, because I'm the dumb one paying too much, right? Um, so yeah, you don't want to be in that situation. But so, like, you'll see deals coming up, you may miss them, like, but it's okay. Like, I think where the real deals are going to come out, when kind of like the lenders get to the point of saturation, the people that have had money on the side kind of get to that point of saturation, where all of a sudden, no, when you hear multifamily sucks from people, that's when it's time to buy. Like, that's when you want to get excited. And there's going to be a lot of pain in multifamily coming up, unfortunately, because I think a lot of LPs are going to get wiped out. A lot of equity groups, they're coming in with, like, to save the deal, where they're recapping the deal, but they wipe out investors. And again, that's a whole nother show. But I just still be patient, make sure your deal works. I wouldn't get too aggressive even right now
That's,
on deals.
keep your gunpowder dry. There's deals coming. So
Yeah.
I know that you're involved with a fund. Let's see. I've got the website on that. I'll make sure it's in the notes as well. It's em-funds.com. That's one of your ventures you've got going on. You've got numeral four, MREI.com. That's another one of your ventures going on. I know that you're involved in Nepal and some orphanages. You have some other things going on in your world. I mean, you're not just a pretty face in real estate. You got a heart under there as well. So,
No.
um, so last question I have for you is, what's next in real estate for you, and why not get started today? And please share some of these things, the fund, the 4M, the orphanage. What do you got?
Well, thanks, man. Why I haven't been buying, and again, after we were just like buying constantly, it just becomes this constant buying, selling, buying, selling. And then 2 years ago, it's kind of time to, I call it CFO mode, which is chill the F out mode. Like, because I have to remind myself, like, oh, there's a deal. Let me go, hang on. Like, I don't want to compete right now. The market's not right. Like, I know it's coming. Um, so that's when I started traveling a little bit more. I did get involved in supporting some orphanages out in Nepal. I sit on the board of, it's called Ancient Secrets Foundation, where we raise money for orphanages. Like, and you hear people donate to orphanages, they build schools, they do the things, but out there, I started supporting one orphanage, and then we went on a trip out there, and we left supporting 4 orphanages. And it's just, so these, an orphanage with like 40 kids can operate for like 15K a year. When I start asking what their whole amount is, like, that's schooling, clothing, food, location, everything, 15K a year. And I'm like, oh my God. So here's some of these. There was one orphanage that, it was an all girls orphanage in Nepal, and they started with 40 girls. They only had 16 by the time we got there. And the group that we were supporting asked that we go and like interview them to see if we want to take them on for support. And here it was a welder guy. He built up a big business. So he was homeless as a child. So he took in all these kids basically. Excuse me, it turned into an all girls orphanage. And when his job when his jobs, they had an earthquake out there, they had COVID, he wasn't making the money to support. And again, they don't have government programs out there like we see in the US. Like, they don't help. So he couldn't afford the kids. So they had to slowly like send the kids away, either back to their village. And weird stuff happens in these other countries. Sometimes like family members sell kids. It's like weird stuff that happens. So to have a group home that was like all girls run like a family. And so we went and visited. We spent a few days out there, and just I told him, like, whatever you got to do, like, we'll support you. Me and a couple friends got together to support him. And again, 3 years worth, I think we had to raise 100 grand, and we raised it to support for 3 years. They're going to be able to get 40 girls back in the home. And it's like a mom and dad that run it, and they don't even want the handout. They just need a bridge until his his business picks back up. But it's like supporting stuff like that. So that really hit me hard. And it gave me a, oh, excuse me, gave me a new zest for what we do, because once you kind of learn the, I just look at it like it's like cracking a safe. Once you learn the code to real estate on how to do the good deals, what renovation costs, and again, it's time and it takes time to figure it out. But once you learn it, like honestly, to make like a difference in somebody's lives, you think, okay, for 100K, here's 40 girls for 3 years that are going to be well supported, and this is like paying for some of their like college with some of the older girls and things like that. So this one, there's a little bit of extra money in there for that. But like for 100 grand, dude, like you are literally changing the lives of 40 kids. And it's just like, to me, it's like, oh, I could do an extra deal and I could support 6 orphanages, right? Like, so you just start learning again, where it gave me a new respect for my ability to create a wealth and create money. And what do I want to do with that, right? It's not so I can have 10 Rolexes and show everybody my jet and partying all the time. Like, it's, you can really make an impact in the world. So that became something that dear to my heart. And then as far as myself, what I'm doing now, I did a lot of syndications towards the end of 2022. Like, I have a development project, things like that. I started doing a fund structure. So right now, the way I'm dealing with my investors, because I don't have a deal right now, but I have people that have been patiently waiting. So I created a fund where we have a cash management system that I learned after selling my stuff and sitting on like kind of some cash myself. Like, how do I keep this working in a safe way where safe, everything's always at risk, but a safer way where my basis isn't really, excuse me, my basis isn't really at risk, but I could earn a decent amount on it. So it's learning that through my own funds and some of my other partners I've worked with, and even some of my investors. I figured out a way to still give a return, like if it was in a deal, so I can do a 7 or 8% return on the like managing the cash. And so what I tell my investors, like, hey, if you get in the fund, we're lining you up at the starting line. Like, I don't have a deal right now, but they know I don't do a deal unless it's a good deal, unless I could see it forward and backward and I could see the pitfalls. I know the risk, and I won't do the deal. I'll wait. So, and they're happy because they're earning cash flow, much like they were with a property. So it works good. So that's the structure I moved into for this, what I believe is coming. And that's worked out pretty well. So that's what I'm doing personally, because if you get a good deal, like that one I had to close in 10 days, the other auction one I had to close in 30 days. If I'm going to start pitching people right then, like I'm not going to be in line for that deal. Somebody else is going to get it. So with this fund, I have access to that money readily available. And that's what I see. That's what I structured for what's to come. And then what was the third question? You had a third one. It was the orphanage, the fund. Oh, and then what's next? So I'm also, I actually just am getting in finalize of speaking with a group about having some education, because one of the reasons I said, if I get hit by a bus, I just want to make sure my kids have what's in my brain, right? Because I have all the stories. I have boots on the ground. Like, I've been involved. I've coached my property managers or managers and property maintenance guys how to fix something. I've done work on the properties myself. Shoot, I've painted so many things. But like, I'd love to get out of my head what I know. And there are women that do the same thing. I don't say there aren't any, but there aren't any that I know of that do it on a large scale. And so a lot of times we're getting educated from people that, and I'm not saying everybody, because there's some really good, great educator people, but I don't know if everybody really knows the whole thing from start to finish. A lot of them know their little piece. Like one of the guys pitched me, I don't want to say the name. They said, hey, Maureen, would you come work with our group? Because we coach people on how to get into a property, but we don't really have anything for them once they get into the property. So I'm like, oh, I could see where that could be a problem. So there's no support for their students or coaching. And so I sat down with them and they said, okay, we'll have to call it. And he gave his name, Way. And I'm like, I'm out, dude. I'm not going to give you all my downloaded stuff. And so you could call it your way, and just, I'm like, forget it. But I do know that there's a need for some of this stuff. And like I said, I was never formally trained, as far as like, I don't have an MBA from Harvard. I don't have a lot of these guys that buy their equity groups and things like that. So I kind of learned my street smarts way. So thinking out of the box. So that's the kind of education that I'd like to deliver to people. Because I think even knowing like 2 years ago, I still, like, the deals I bought, I always bought like long-term debt. I buy something called a step down prepay as opposed to yield maintenance, which again is a whole another topic. But that just making like the step down prepay, I have to pay a little bit extra on my interest rate to get that. But if I had just yield maintenance, which would have saved me a little bit on my interest rate, I wouldn't have been able to exit all those properties when I decided to in 2021 and 2022. I think I saved about $15 million in costs by just that one decision. And it's like knowing those things. And I don't know if the people that teach it even know those things, because I think some of them are stuck right now. And again, it's not everybody. Some are very smart. I know our friend Dave that we met through Brian. Like he sold his portfolio at the same time I did, so he's on the ball. Like he's good in my book. But I do think it's just some of the tricks I've learned over the years by being boots on the ground. I'd like to share and get out. And again, I think it'll just help people be safe and keep themselves safe, make good choices.
So that step down prepay, you pay a little bit more interest. And for people on the show that don't understand what this is a deficiency fee, which is actually a penalty if you get out of that mortgage. So you're paying a little bit extra in the interest, but you're able to exit the deal without getting clobbered on a defeasance fee, which you said could have been up to 15 million. So yeah.
Yeah, on that portfolio, it equaled about 15 million I would have had to pay. And it's a strange calculation, but it almost like roughly to understand how it counts. If you get a 10-year note on a property and you have defeasance and you want to exit in year 2, it's almost the cost of those 8 years of interest you're paying them on top of it. So it would make a difference of being able to sell a property and not being able to sell a property. Because if I have to pay 2.5 million in defeasance, that might be more than what I'm going to make on the property with me and my investors. So it actually can hold you stuck into a property, which I'm sure is happening to some of the people right now, where they can't even exit if they want to because the defeasance is too high.
And
so that's
last I checked, interest is deductible.
Say that again. Interest is deductible.
Yeah, last I so if you're paying a little bit more in the interest in the step down prepay, it's like one of those extra layers of frosting on the cake in real estate that isn't really sexy or glamorous. Everybody looks at how much money did I sell or what am I getting for cash flow, but there's all these other little gems on the table. And that's just another nugget there. That's been fantastic. I would love to talk to you for a couple more hours, but
I know, right?
no, this has been so much fun and definitely worth the wait for my peeps out there who don't know. Let's see, it's March, April, May, June. 9 months I've been waiting for this moment. Worth every—
Sorry, Brian. I've been a little busy, but we're good now. Yeah, I'm home for a week. Like, yeah.
No, I said it when we were in the green room up front. This has been well worth the wait, and you absolutely brought it to the table. So much to share. When you get more information on the coaching, love to have you come back. You can love to have you promote that as we move forward with our podcast. If there's anything you want us to share with the listeners, happy to even just put a little spot out there on the podcast, whatever you want. And as I said at the beginning, all of this stuff, you'll get the raw footage, you get the final cut, use it for whatever you want to do for any of your marketing. Absolutely love to do that. So here we are. We're at the end of the show. And how would you like our listeners to reach out and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so if you're curious on the fund structure and just want to take a look at that, again, it's TM, like Tom Michael funds, funds.com. Feel free to check that out. It's a different structure, especially if you're new or syndicating. It might be just a good structure to understand. And then, my email, which I do have an assistant watch, so she filters things through me. But if you say, Brian podcast, or I'm sorry, Brian, what do you call your podcast again? Why not?
Podcast.
Yeah, so if you put "why not" in the subject line, I'm sure she'll get it to me. But it's M Miles, so Maureen Miles, just like the measurement. So MMILES at the number 4, and then MREI.com. So 4M Real Estate Investments is what that stands for. So M Miles at 4MREI.com.
Absolutely wonderful. And I cannot thank you again. You absolutely brought it so much. I think I've got about 6 pages of notes here. This was an education for me. just loved sharing some time with you. I haven't, we hadn't had this much time together in a while. Anything else you want to share with us before we sign off, Maureen?
No, I think that's it. Just like I said, be cautious over the next little bit. Don't get too aggressive. I think there's more opportunity coming, and stick to your numbers. Like, don't be too aggressive. If you don't understand it, don't do it. Just wait. And yeah, find good people to work with. That you can't do this yourself. Like, there's just no way. You got to have a team, and just knowing that team has your back is number one. Like, you don't want to spend time worrying about the guy that's supposed to be standing next to you, supporting you, like what he's doing. You always want to face in the same direction, and that's the way to move forward quickly and be successful.
Again, thank you so much for bringing it, my real estate peeps. This is Brian Lucier signing off from another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.